My name is Margaret Hayes. I am 65 years old, and this morning, according to the folded programs in the hands of nearly everyone in town, I am supposed to be dead. The paper says it clearly, my birth date, the date of my passing, even a verse chosen to make it sound gentle. Yet here I am, standing in the doorway of St. Matthew's, lungs filling with air that smells of lilies and candle wax, staring at a crowd that thinks it has gathered to mourn me. The bell in the steeple begins to toll, one deep note after another. Each strike feels like it is nailing the lid shut on a coffin I never occupied. I grip the edge of the door frame to remind myself I am not a ghost. I am flesh and bone, scarred wrists hidden beneath my cardigan sleeves, a pulse drumming loud enough to shake the silence that follows me into the sanctuary. At the front, perched on an easel, is a photograph they chose without asking me, one where I am looking off to the side, as though distracted. Below it rests a spray of white lilies, a casket-shaped arrangement so large it blocks part of the pulpit. I count 6 baskets of tissues scattered along the aisles, as if grief can be rationed out in squares. A woman I've known for 40 years dabs her eyes already, tears for a death that never happened. I step forward, and the wooden floor creaks beneath my sensible shoes. Conversations die mid-sentence. A prayer card slips from someone's lap and lands with a papery sigh. My sister, Helen, sits near the front with her head bowed, hands tight around a pen she keeps capping and uncapping. 2 rows behind her, Ethan and Clara, my late husband's grown children, freeze in place. Their faces, so carefully arranged into masks of sorrow, crack wide open the moment they see me. A man in a dark suit at the aisle seat shifts, jaw stiff, tie too severe for a spring morning. He thought he had written the final line of my story. The pastor stops speaking. His mouth stays open, but no words emerge. The silence that follows is not the soft hush of reverence. It is the stunned stillness that comes when reality betrays expectation. Every eye is on me. Every breath is waiting for mine. I move down the aisle slowly, not rushing, not apologizing, as if this walk belongs to me, and it does. I pass the flowers meant to honor me, the photograph meant to represent me, the people who plotted to erase me. My palms brush the polished wood of the pews. The air is heavy, thick with disbelief, and still I keep walking until I reach the front, set my hand on the pulpit to feel the solid grain beneath my skin, and lift my chin. My name, I say, my voice carrying farther than I expect, is Margaret Hayes. Before you bury me, before you spend a dime of what you tried to steal, you should hear how I survived. The story begins in my kitchen, the room that has always carried the pulse of my home. That morning, I had a pot of chicken soup simmering, steam fogging the window above the sink, the smell of thyme and carrots filling the air. The radio was playing low, some ball game I wasn't listening to. I remember wiping the glass with a rag, leaving a half moon of lint by the latch, and thinking that the day felt ordinary. That thought would be the last ordinary thing I had for a long while. The garage door opened with a soft click. Careful, practiced. At first I thought it was Helen stopping by unannounced, maybe bringing me something from the market. But the footsteps were not hers. They were younger, heavier, impatient. When I turned, the sight that greeted me was not a bag of groceries or a familiar smile. It was a loop of plastic zip tie stretched between 2 hands, and a can of pepper spray angled just enough to tell me this was no mistake. "Don't make this harder," Ethan said. His voice had the sharp edge of a man who believes fear is a tool. He looked so much like his father in that moment, the same strong brow, the same refusal to meet my eyes, that a strange sadness pierced through my shock. Clara stood just behind him, her eyes pale and unsteady, lips trembling as if she wanted to say something kind and cruel at the same time. I didn't scream. Instinct told me that screaming would only give them the sound they wanted. Instead, I glanced at the stove. "Turn it off," I said. "I won't leave a flame burning." The word surprised even me. Ethan cursed, stepped around me, and twisted the knob until the fire died. For one strange second, it looked like a family scene, me insisting on safety, him obeying, but then the plastic cut into my wrists and the cloth gag pressed against my mouth, and the illusion shattered. They tied me to the chair with a precision that chilled me. Not clumsy, not improvised, planned. Clara even draped my cardigan over my shoulders, as if modesty mattered while my freedom was being stripped away. The kindness stung more than the zip tie. They spoke in low voices, avoiding my name, as if speaking it might remind them I was a person. The drive blurred by in fragments, the chalk sun drawn on my garage floor by a neighbor's toddler, the Methodist church where the town fair set up each summer, the diner with its pie carousel, the craft store with its lopsided sale sign. I memorized it all because memory was my only weapon. The dashboard clock read 4:23. The sky had the faded blue of old denim. Every stoplight made their bodies go still, as if stillness could make us invisible. When the pavement turned to gravel, I knew we were leaving the safety of neighbors behind. The cabin appeared through the trees like something abandoned on purpose, its wood silvered by years of sun and rain. Ethan parked where no one could see the license plate. He and Clara marched me inside and down a narrow flight of stairs into a basement that smelled of paint and dust. A rug too bright for its surroundings lay crooked on the floor. A lamp hummed in the corner. They sat me in a chair and cinched another tie around my ankles. Then they left, their footsteps echoing as the door shut almost, but not quite. Closed. I tested the plastic, felt its bite, and leaned my head back. Above me, the ceiling creaked as voices began to murmur. A man's tone carried through the floorboards, smooth, educated, too polished to belong here. I caught words like affidavit and 10 o'clock Monday. Victor, they called him. The name stuck in my chest like a thorn. My captors had allies, and their plan had a timetable. The rug shifted under my chair as I moved, searching the dim room. That was when I saw it, the vent cover near the baseboard, bent just slightly at the corner, metal sharp where it had been pried once before. I knew then that the plastic around my wrists would not last forever. The vent became my companion in those hours, the one piece of the basement that seemed willing to work with me. Its bent corner caught the light whenever the lamp flickered, a reminder that metal is sharper than it looks. I rocked the chair slowly, pressing my bound wrists against the edge, listening to the faint scrape of plastic fibers giving way. I didn't rush. Panic wastes energy. Patience is what keeps you alive. Time stretched long, measured by the drip of a pipe in the corner and the tick of a cheap clock on the wall. I closed my eyes and pictured the pot of soup cooling on my stove, the way the steam fogged the window, the rag with its crescent of lint. I promised myself I would remember every detail. If they wanted me gone, then remembering was my rebellion. Footsteps thudded above me, voices carried through the floorboards, Ethan's low growl, Clara's nervous laugh, and that other voice, smooth, practiced, the one they called Victor. He spoke about papers, affidavits, clerks who signed faster than they read. Monday at 10. The words echoed through the basement like church bells announcing a funeral that hadn't happened yet. My funeral. Then the door creaked. I froze, forcing my wrists back into my lap, hiding the red lines the vent had carved into my skin. A slim figure slipped inside and closed the door with both hands, as though she could keep the whole world out if she pushed hard enough. It wasn't Clara. It wasn't Ethan. It was Emily, Helen's daughter, my niece, no longer the child who once tumbled through sprinklers in my yard, but not yet the woman she would become. Her eyes were wide, scared, but steady. She hurried to me, crouched low so her shadow wouldn't show under the door. She pulled the cloth from my mouth, and I drank the dusty air as if it were water. "Aunt Margaret," she whispered, voice breaking. "I can't stay long. They think I'm upstairs doing homework." My heart thudded harder than the clock's tick. "Why are you here?" I whispered back. "Because you're not dead," she said simply. She pressed something small and weighty into my hands. A phone, cheap and black, the kind you buy with cash and never register. It's a burner. No GPS if you keep it off. There's a recorder. You can catch them talking. If you can get it close to the vent, the sound will carry... For a moment, I couldn't speak. This child, still carrying the scar from the bicycle fall on her forehead, had risked everything to bring me a chance. "Emily," I managed, "this is dangerous." Her chin trembled, but she lifted it. "So is doing nothing." I slipped the phone into my cardigan sleeve. Above us, a door slammed. Voices rose. She flinched, then quickly stuffed the cloth back against my mouth, her hands gentle where Ethan's had been cruel. Before she left, she slid a folded scrap of paper into my palm, the church bulletin from St. Matthew's, the memorial time circled in blue ink. Beneath it, in her neat handwriting, Monday, 10th Yawi M. Trust Office. Victor. Then she was gone. The door closing with a soft click. I was alone again, but no longer hopeless. I turned the phone over by touch, learned the buttons with my fingers until I could find the record icon without looking. When the voices started again upstairs, I tapped it, slid the phone closer to the vent with the heel of my palm, and bowed my head as if in defeat. They were careless in their confidence. Affidavit, certification, widow's signature, triggered principal, Clara's laugh, Ethan's irritation, Victor's assurance that no one will question it. Their greed filled the room like smoke, and I caught every word. When I turned the phone off, my wrists were raw and burning, but my resolve was sharper than the vent's edge. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and thought, they believe they've buried me. They have no idea what I'm about to do next. Night in that basement had its own sound, a kind of hollow quiet broken only by the drip of water in the corner and the restless shuffle of mice in the walls. I waited until the house above me went still. The television clicked off. The last footsteps retreated, and silence settled heavy as dust. That was when I pressed my wrists once more against the vent's jagged corner and refused to stop. The zip tie bit deeper, cutting my skin, but I welcomed the sting. Each scrape sang of freedom. When the first strand snapped, I closed my eyes and breathed through the pain. The second followed, then the third, until the tie gave way with a quiet pop that sounded louder than thunder in that room. I rubbed my wrists, felt the blood rush back into my hands, and bent forward to attack the ones at my ankles. It took longer, but finally the plastic broke, and I stood, shaky but upright, after what felt like a lifetime in that chair. The basement door was still ajar, just slightly. I pushed it with 2 fingers, pausing every time the wood groaned. The hallway upstairs glowed faint blue from the television's afterimage. I listened. A door creaked, then a low snore floated down the corridor. Emily's softer breathing followed, and I prayed she would stay asleep, safe from whatever storm I was about to unleash. I stepped on rugs, avoided the boards I knew would betray me. Years of living in old houses teaches you where the floors like to gossip. In the kitchen, I found my purse on the counter, as if it had never belonged to me. The keys were gone, but I remembered the secret pocket I had stitched into the lining long ago. My fingers trembled, but I found the spare key. It felt like touching a piece of my former life. The back door latch was stubborn, but I coaxed it like an old friend until it opened with a sigh. Cold air wrapped around me, and the night sky stretched wide, wearing a pale moon like a medal. I slipped outside, heart thudding so loud I was sure the trees could hear it. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes as I crept toward the garage. A sedan waited, not mine, but its keys sat carelessly in a ceramic dish by the door. I didn't hesitate. The engine coughed, then steadied. I drove away with the patience of a woman who knows every second counts. At the first gas station, I stopped. Not for fuel, but for evidence. I stood beneath the camera, lifted my chin, and bought a bottle of water and a pack of tissues with cash. The clerk barely looked at me, which was exactly what I wanted. Ordinary people pass unnoticed, and I had learned the value of ordinary. I folded the receipt into my cardigan pocket, proof of life stamped in ink. I didn't dare use the burner in the open. Instead, I drove 2 more miles to a pharmacy with a payphone out front. My hands shook as I dialed Detective Ramirez, the number I knew from a neighborhood watch flyer I had once dismissed. When the machine picked up, I spoke clearly. My name, the fact that I was alive, the name Victor Grant, the time Monday at 10, the trust office. Then I played the recording into the receiver, my captor's greed spilling into the line like poison. After that, I called Janet. My voice cracked as I told her to wear a sweater to church in case the air conditioning was cold. She cried softly, promised she would sit in the 3rd pew on the aisle, a lighthouse waiting if I needed to find her. When I hung up, the night felt lighter, as though the stars themselves had heard me. I drove back toward town, parked 2 blocks from St. Matthew's, and cut the engine. The lilies hadn't yet arrived, but I could smell their sweetness in the breeze. I rested my hand on the hood, felt the warmth fade, and whispered to the dark, "They wanted me buried. Instead, I will rise." Saturday morning dawned bright, the kind of crisp light that makes even grief look polished. I sat in the car 2 blocks from St. Matthew's, listening to the bell warm up its first chime. My palms were damp, my wrists still raw, but my heart beat steady. The town had gathered to bury me. I intended to give them something else to remember. The church steps were crowded with lilies, their perfume almost choking. I waited until the 2nd bell rang before I stepped inside. Heads turned as the doors creaked. The hush rolled through the sanctuary like a wave, swallowing whispers, silencing coughs. People clutched their programs, my face printed on the front, dates carved like a headstone. I walked slowly, the soles of my shoes clicking against polished wood, each step pulling the breath tighter from the room. At the front, on the easel, was the photograph they had chosen, a candid shot where I wasn't looking at the camera, as if distracted. I faced it directly now, alive and undeniable. My sister Helen was near the front, her shoulders hunched, a pen snapping between her fingers. When her eyes lifted and met mine, the color drained from her face. Behind her, Ethan and Clara froze mid-breath, their carefully composed sorrow collapsing into raw disbelief. And there, in the aisle seat, Victor Grant's jaw locked, the confidence he wore like armor cracking for the first time. The pastor's words faltered, hanging in the air unfinished. I moved to the pulpit, placed my hand on the wood, and spoke with a voice steadier than I felt. "My name is Margaret Hayes. Before you bury me, before you spend a dime of what you tried to steal, you should hear how I survived." Gasps rippled through the congregation. I reached into my cardigan sleeve, drew out the burner phone, and pressed play. The sanctuary filled with voices that weren't supposed to be heard here, Victor's smooth instructions about affidavits and certifications, Ethan's impatience, Clara's brittle laughter, Helen's nervous assent. Each word was a nail hammered into their own coffin. "Monday, 10 o'clock, Victor said on the recording, smug and certain. "We'll have it all by then." The silence that followed was heavier than stone. People shifted in their seats, eyes darting between the living woman at the pulpit and the family who had declared her dead. Someone dropped a hymnal. The thud echoed like a gavel. Then came the footsteps. Detective Ramirez, flanked by 2 officers, strode down the aisle. His badge caught the light, and his expression left no room for doubt. He moved straight to Victor, snapped cold cuffs around his wrists, and turned next to Ethan and Clara, their protests lost under the scrape of metal. Helen tried to rise, tears streaking her cheeks, but the officers guided her down firmly. The church was no longer a sanctuary, it was a courtroom. I stood there, breathing the same air as the lilies meant for me, my voice still echoing from the speakers. For the first time in days, I felt taller than my fear. They had tried to write the end of my story, but I had just taken the pen back. The arrests didn't end the story, though they ended the illusion. The following weeks were a blur of hearings, paperwork, and the kind of questions no one ever imagines answering. I sat in court while the judge froze the trust, his gavel sharp as thunder. The money they craved was locked away, beyond their reach. For once, greed had no purchase. Victor tried to bluff, speaking in long, slippery sentences about technicalities, but the recording cut through his arguments like glass. Ethan kept his eyes fixed on the table, jaw tight, while Clara trembled each time the audio replayed. Helen. Helen was the hardest to watch. My sister couldn't look at me. Not even once. When the bailiff led her away in cuffs, her tears streaked down her face like she was dissolving, piece by piece. I wish I could say I felt nothing. Instead, I felt too much. Rage for the betrayal, sorrow for the girl she used to be, the sister who once held my hand on our walk to school. I carried that ache out of the courtroom, and it stayed with me like an unwelcome guest. Emily, though, was my light. She visited me every few days, bringing groceries, sitting at my kitchen table where the soup pot still waited. She was the one who reminded me that family could also mean rescue, not just ruin. When I thanked her, she shook her head and said, "You saved yourself. I just helped open the door." At 16, she understood more about courage than most adults I knew. Eventually. I sold the house. Too many ghosts in the walls. Too many nights waking at the sound of a car door. I moved into a smaller apartment, close enough to walk to the market, quiet enough that I could hear myself think. I bought new curtains, softer plates, and a lamp that glowed warm at night. Life was smaller, but it fit. Sometimes, I sit by the window and run my fingers over the scars on my wrists. They remind me not of pain, but of the truth. I survived. I wasn't erased, not by their lies, not by their greed. When I pass St. Matthew's now, I still smell the lilies, but instead of thinking about the memorial they planned for me, I think about the moment I walked through those doors alive. I think about how silence cracked open, how gasps filled the air, how justice finally stepped forward. I never asked to be the center of such a story, but it is mine. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that survival is not about luck. It's about refusing to let anyone else write the ending. So when people ask how I am, I smile and say, I'm living my life again, on my terms. And that, after everything, is more than enough. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy these family, drama, and revenge stories, please subscribe and join me for more every day.